Professor Wang Dong, you were born in Zhejiang province, but you live in Beijing. Now, we're here in Hong Kong today, but I want you to tell everybody, what is Beijing like in the year 2024, out of a pandemic and into a different era for the world?
Oh, Beijing, well, being capital of the country and also the cultural center. So being an academic myself, now teaching at Peking University, I can tell you that a lot of academic activities, is going on. Academic exchanges, including we receiving delegations from American university, professors, their students, and also engage a lot of dialogue with our American counterpart, and a lot of collaboration also going on. So I think that's now, and for us scholars, I think it is an exciting moment now. I think we pick up the momentum and start planning, and already something we already done over the years, and we wanted to build on those achievements, and we look for a more collaboration going forward.
I mean, for me, that's so encouraging to hear from you and to understand, because on the one hand, we have this very high level activity of ministers going backwards and forwards between Beijing and Washington. Of course, Secretary Tony Blinken was recently in Beijing. One example, the two presidents met in California a couple of months ago, another example. But there's also this very low base of relationship to work off because of years of difficulties, complexities, and of course, a pandemic to boot. We hear about there only being some 700 American students studying in China right now. At the same time, you're telling us that there is a thriving academic exchange. Is the picture a combination of the two?
Well, I think the numbers, it's a bit of debatable, depending on how you define it. I think the number comes from the American side, based on perhaps the number of American students registered, studying currently, pursuing degree in China. That number is much limited. But if you also take into account the American student who come to even pay a short visit, 1 week or 2 week, or summer course, the number could be multiple. I think times of that number could be at least, I think, over 1,000. I think so. You already mentioned there are two leaders, two presidents met in San Francisco last November, and the president, she also unveiled this plan initiative to invite 50,000 American students to come to visit and study in China over the next 5 years. So we actually now, Beida, Peking University is part of that effort. We try to really encourage and work very closely with our American counterpart to welcome more American students to come to visit and study in China, including at Peking University.
Personally, I think that the 50,000 vision is an amazing one. It harks back to the 100,000 strong that President Barack Obama himself established. I get it that you say that the numbers could be closer to 1,000 than 700. I think we can agree, though, that the numbers have really collapsed from their peak of many, many thousands right before the pandemic. And I get also that the vision of 50,000 is already in motion. What I'm concerned about, though, is this. Do 50,000 American students want to come to China over the next 5 years, even if they are invited?
Well, my impression is that there is also quite some enthusiasm on the part of our American counterpart, because we keep close contact with a lot of American universities. We do understand there is quite some enthusiasm on the part of American universities, and we also work very hard with various government agency, foreign ministry, Ministry of Education, etc. Try to create better condition, I think, for American students to come to visit. Personally, I cannot, of course, speak for all American students, but based on my interactions with the students we receive, for instance, I think a couple of weeks ago we received a group of students led by their professor from John Hopkins SAIS, and it was and we actually put our students and the SAIS students together, mingle them together, and have them to have lunch at our cafeteria together, and that was just amazing. A student, they really, I think, love to interact with each other, and there's a lot of deep conversation. And we also have, senior professor from our side to give a lecture on U.S.-China relations. And then I said, give all the Q&As to our American students, and they ask tons of questions.
Well, what questions
everything
do they ask?
You can imagine, Belt and Road Initiative, and Chinese foreign policy, China-U.S. relations, just a wide range of issues.
Are they skeptical? Are they hopeful? Are they inquisitive? What's the mood? What's the temperature of that mood?
I think generally, the American students are very, they are very much, try to understand, for instance, what really Belt and Road Initiative is about. And of course, they would have some impression based on their reading of the American Western media, right? And then our professor will try to, communicate with them, try to explain to them what the real intention, what the real practice is. And of course, we're not hiding from the challenges we're also facing, and try to be very honest and frank with them. So at the end of the day, I think such kind of exchanges are really fruitful, really productive, and students, American students, are very, I think they're very happy about the kind of visit. Yeah.
When you have a class of American students, and you've taught American students, and you've been a student at UCLA yourself, and when you have a class, say, of mainland Chinese students, do they ask the same questions, and do they ask those in the same way?
Well, I wouldn't expect the Chinese students and American students will ask specifically, exactly, pose a question in the exact same manner. There will be different approach, different perspective, of course, different, also background, different way of understanding. But I think they're also the same sort of concern, right? There's a mutual understanding. This relationship is very important. And they also take, for example, the current, the student dialogue. We're organizing, collaborating with Georgetown University, and also involving Fudan University and UCSD. We've been doing this for a number of years. This is our fourth year. And we have subject matters for students dialogue discussion, including climate change, UN SDGs, global development, China's global development initiative, etc. And those things, the students they are very intrigued in finding answers, a lot of challenges, and they also do agree and understand this is common as challenges facing China, United States, and actually indeed the whole world together. So I think that's something, when I look at it, I think I'm very encouraged about it. Really something very, very amazing.
You mentioned this student delegation of 4 universities from Peking, Georgetown, Fudan, and UC San Diego. And our CUSEF, China United States Exchange Foundation, is So happy to support this year. You're in Hong Kong for the first time, I believe, this delegation, and you're going to Shenzhen after this. We do this work because we believe that when you get young people in one room, in one space, be it a lecture theatre or in a canteen, as you said, at Peking University, we want Americans and Chinese to connect, to exchange ideas, to share their values in a way that is respectful and meaningful. But who do you think learns more from one another? Which group do you think benefits from this experience, coming from the culture that they do, and also going out into the world in the way we're helping them do?
Well, I think individually there must be some sort of variations, right? Some people learn more, some people learn less, but on average, I believe that both the Chinese students, American students, they learn sort of equally, right? The amount of knowledge, the amount of information from each other, and that's I think it's fair to say that this is a mutually meaningful sort of learning experience for both groups, for Chinese students and American students.
Perception is so different, and the perception and the gaps in it was something that you picked up on following that summit in California between President Biden and President Xi Jinping. You talked about the temperature gap and how that summit was covered by American and Chinese media. What was that gap, and what do you think contributed to the way that they approached the same event?
Well, there was clearly a temperature gap in the way the media coverage about the summit. The Chinese media tends to be quite enthusiastic in covering the summit and sort of hailing it as sort of setting, the guiding principles for the China-U.S. relationship going forward. By contrast, I think the American media tend to be lukewarm, if not suspicious. And partly, I think, is because that in the United States, the President Biden, he's under, for instance, pressure from Congress, right? And the media naturally would be suspicious of even the promises he made at the summit, to what extent he can deliver later on. So I think those kind of things really create different dynamics in the way that media then create different perception.
So the stakeholders, key stakeholders like yourself, know that the system of governance and this being an election year will obviously steer a certain narrative in America. Quite simply, any president of the United States has real domestic pressures in a way that would be different in China. So while key stakeholders know that, do they understand that in a way that they're empathetic towards that? Do they create a buffer that allows for that? So this miscommunication, this tension that we've seen characterize US-China relations over the last decade almost, do you think that is enough to offset that?
I think we, at the end of the day, I think, for instance, both governments actually agree that despite the media coverage, right, the temperature gap, I think both governments agree that the summit was really crucial. It was pivotal in setting up the important principles for guiding the directions of China-U.S. relations going forward. But I think you're right. I think it will take a lot more efforts, I think, for both sides really to sort of navigate through, right, the domestic complexities, and particularly, as you mentioned, that the ongoing, upcoming American presidential election, which add to the already complex domestic political situation, more layers of complexity. So how to do that? I think the short answer is that the more exchanges at all levels, at the leaders level, political level, government level, and at academic level, at the society level. I think the more exchanges, the more chances we'll be able to better understand each other and avoid misunderstanding, miscommunication.
Many Americans, not all Americans, but many Americans ask me, who do the Chinese want to win the election in November? Now, I wasn't born in China, I wasn't raised there, so I can't answer that question, but you were. And I'm sure many of your American colleagues and friends ask you that same question. What do you tell them?
You know, what we think about, what we want, it really doesn't count, right? So, so I think for us, I think for Chinese people, my understanding that we wanted whoever wins this election, we wanted the next president who will be sitting in the White House and setting the direction, the policies for China-US relations going forward, will be someone who can take the pragmatism, right, and the rational way of thinking, and also really the mutual interest of both countries. So, another way, putting in other words, it's not a zero-sum confrontational, really pushing the relations to the edge of open conflict or even direct military conflict, but really that take the kind of pragmatic, responsible way of managing it and producing a more stable and better relations in the at least next 4 years.
At CUSEF, we don't only work in people or cultural exchanges, important though they are. We're also very concerned about the economy and the global economy, the health and the well-being of it. I think that the economy at the end of the day is the fundamental foundation stone of the bilateral relationship, because we can get into long conversations about geopolitics and security and diplomacy, but we often forget that the economic one is a very, very important one, a critical one even. So let's shift our focus in that direction. Investors are saying that it's hard to prosper because there is a lack of predictability in the US-China relationship. I mean, at a conference, at US-China relation conferences, say 10 years ago even, as recently as that, the audience will be mainly scholars and analysts. Now you see banks, you see financial leaders coming in because they want to read what the trend is likely to be and to understand how they can anticipate those trends before those trends emerge. So is there going to be some stability? Is there going to be any predictability coming in anytime soon?
This is precisely one thing, why we believe the summit last year took place in San Francisco between our two leaders, two presidents. Really crucial, really important, because among many things, it really bring in more stability and predictability back to the bilateral relationship.
You really think it did?
It did.
It did.
Yeah. To some extent. It's not. It's still, I think, more predictability would be better, more stability. Both sides need to do more to stabilize the relationship, but we also do understand there are general disagreement between the two sides. And how to manage those differences are also of crucial importance.
I think that they need to state very clearly that there will always be differences, that they will never, ever find agreement on. To acknowledge that, to agree to disagree, as people like Mr. Deng Xiaoping and Jimmy Carter did 45 years ago this year. And that is actually not only a good restarting point, but also demonstrates respect towards one another. That I understand that you have your own take on this. Unfortunately, we won't be able to find daylight on this, but there are many other issues on which we can. Do we need another approach? I mean, you spoke at the beginning of the Biden administration about a new form, a new engagement consensus. I'm not sure whether you agree whether it's worked or not, but to the people outside of that, they will say that the relationship has failed spectacularly, even more so than from the previous administration. So as we go to the next administration, there will definitely be a former president of the United States in the White House, whether it be President Biden or President Trump. Would you push again for that same model of an engagement consensus, or would you adjust it to suit a changing time, but also a lot hasn't changed?
I think, new engagement consensus is contrary to what I call the old engagement consensus, in which the consensus, the bipartisan consensus in the United States of engaging China since normalization. The idea is that the United States would usher China into a US-led international system with the explicit expectation that China will be changed, become like the United States over time, both economically and politically. That old engagement consensus failed. Of course, it was gone, along with the old equilibrium in the bilateral relationship. So I think what we face now is that with the disruption of the old equilibrium in the bilateral relationship, we need to establish a new one. And a process which I think probably take a decade or perhaps two. So it is not something will happen immediately next year. It's a long process. So my understanding that China, United States will have to, the idea of new engagement consensus is really they engage each other, not unlike the old one, but now they will engage each other with mutual respect and reciprocity without this intent try to change the other. But also they serve as two pillars of the global system and help to promote and push the global system together with other stakeholders of the international system and make it more stable and prosperous in the years to come, while in the process managing their differences in a, of course there will be competition, no doubt about that, but there's no vicious competition, right? So it will be a healthy one, and it will be well managed, and it will be calibrated. So I understand this is, I would argue this is one of the sort of ideal pathway going forward. There's no guarantee it will happen, but as a scholar, I think my responsibility, my duty is really to try to, based on the rational, right, sort of calculation or understanding analysis, I try to point out this should be the way to go. And how to do that, I think scholars can only do small share of our of what we can do, which is to help promote more academic exchanges, including student dialogue. But I think everyone, if we agree that the crucial importance of the bilateral relationship in the coming decades, we have to work, I think, toward that. No matter what. Yeah.
Let me finish off with this, because you wrote an article about 10 years ago, or exactly 10 years ago, called "How We Should Not Misread China." I want to flip that title around and to finish off by asking you this: how should we not misread the United States? We as a world, we as Chinese. You've been a beneficiary of America, both as a student, and you've contributed to America as a teacher at a university in Pennsylvania. So as someone who has interacted with both cultures, you're of one, you've gone to the other, you really do have a unique insight into that. How should we not misread the United States? How should we not misread Americans?
Thank you. Well, again, I was surprised that you actually read my article that I published more than 10 years ago. I was really flattered by that. Thank you. I think the question is that we have to understand that the United States is also a very complex society. So we have to. It's not. There's no single voice. The United States, yes, being a hegemon now, and China rising very rapidly in the on the international stage. So there's bound to be tension between the two, but how to manage that, I think also it requires, I think it's very important for us to also to understand, I think better understand the United States as it is, not as what we imagine or what we fear. I think the same can also be applied to the United States as well. The United States should also understand as it is, not as it imagines or not as it fears. And this is precisely what is going on now. If we look at the American narrative about China, it's really a mix of fear, mixed of misperception, prejudice, even paranoia. So how to avoid that and to arrive at a more cool-headed, more pragmatic, more rational understanding of each other will be the key. And I think we, as scholars, we definitely should do more work in that regard.
Well, I very much hope, and my great hope is that this conversation, specifically your insights in this conversation, will help illuminate minds and also to put us all back on a track where, as you said, perception is not based on imagination and not on fear as well. Professor Wang Dong, thank you very, very much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
Learning from you today.
My honor. Thank you so much. Thank you.